Ever have those days where your brain just feels, well, foggy? You're staring at your screen, the words just aren't coming. Or maybe your mood just tanks, seemingly out of nowhere. What if the key to sharper focus, clearer thinking, and maybe more stable mood isn't some new productivity app, but something way more fundamental, like the actual food on your plate? Today, we're diving deep into some really fascinating research you've shared, looking at this powerful, often overlooked link between our nutrition and our mental well-being. Our mission, really, is to give you a shortcut to truly understanding this incredible mind-body connection. Okay, let's try and unpack this a bit. For years, we've talked about food mostly for physical health, right? Managing weight, heart health, energy levels, stuff like that. But the material you shared really highlights something else, something quite profound: how deeply our diet is intertwined with our mental health.
It really is. And what's striking when you look at the data is just how widespread mental health challenges are. I mean, we're talking about conditions like depression, which affects, around 280 million people globally. It's actually a leading cause of disability worldwide.
Wow, 280 million. That's huge.
It is. And when you think about that scale, it really raises a big question. Could something as seemingly basic as what we eat be a significant piece of the puzzle here?
Absolutely.
Right.
It makes you wonder. So if these challenges are so common, what role can diet realistically play? The research you've pulled together really zooms in on one specific eating pattern known for being super healthy: the Mediterranean diet. For anyone not familiar, maybe we should quickly describe it. It's basically rich in whole foods. Lots of fruits, vegetables, nuts, olive oil, whole grains, and then lean proteins like fish and poultry, maybe some moderate red wine.
Yeah.
It's not really a diet in the modern sense, more a traditional way of eating. It was famously observed by Ansel Keys back in the 60s, wasn't it? In places with really low rates of heart disease.
Exactly. And if we connect that back to mental health, numerous studies, both cross-sectional and cohort studies, now consistently show this strong negative association. Basically, the more closely people follow this Mediterranean style of eating, the lower their risk of experiencing depression seems to be.
So it's not just a random correlation.
No, it seems the components themselves are doing important work. You've got, for instance, high levels of omega-3 fatty acids. These are just crucial for calming inflammation throughout the body, and that includes in the brain. Then there's all the fiber, mainly from the whole grains, fruits, and vegetables. That's fantastic for your gut microbiome.
Right, the gut-brain axis connection we hear so much about.
Precisely. Those trillions of bacteria in your gut have a huge influence on everything, including mood. Plus, you get loads of antioxidants and healthy unsaturated fats from things like olive oil and nuts. The whole field of nutritional psychiatry is really confirming this now. What we eat profoundly impacts both our physical and our mental health. It's probably not a coincidence that people struggling with mental illness often have poorer diets too. It can become a bit of a cycle.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly then to something I think a lot of people can relate to: brain fog. That really frustrating feeling, right? Confusion, maybe forgetfulness, just difficulty concentrating, like your brain's wading through mud. Your sources define it as sort of a collection of symptoms, often linked back to low-level chronic inflammation in the brain. Things like, difficulty concentrating, that general haziness, maybe struggling to find the right words, getting easily distracted.
Yeah, it's very common. And what's really insightful from the research is that even just under-eating, simply not getting enough calories, can negatively impact your cognitive function and make that brain fog worse.
Really? Just not eating enough?
Yes. When you're not fueling your body adequately, you increase your risk of nutritional deficiencies. And those deficiencies, as we'll see, directly link to things like memory loss and just slower thinking. And there's a mental health connection, too. Research shows malnutrition can actually double the risk of anxiety symptoms and, get this, more than 6 times the risk of depression symptoms, both of which, of course, can really intensify brain fog. So it's not just about the quality of food, but also the quantity, making sure your brain has enough fuel to run properly.
Wow, okay. And this is where it gets really interesting, I think. The research pinpoints several specific nutrient deficiencies that can directly contribute to that foggy feeling. Like the hidden culprits. You mentioned vitamin D, for example. We usually think of it for bones, right? But it plays a key role in brain function. Low levels aren't just linked to bone issues. They're tied to a higher risk of depression. And as we just said, depression can definitely cause brain fog and memory problems.
Yeah.
There was one study you highlighted: older women with low vitamin D.
That's right. A compelling study. They found that older women with low vitamin D levels who supplemented with 2,000 IUs a day for a year actually performed better on learning and memory tests afterward.
That's a pretty clear link.
It is. And it doesn't stop there. Take vitamin B12. It's absolutely essential for things like DNA synthesis, making red blood cells, and just keeping your central nervous system working properly. A B12 deficiency can show up as problems with memory, thinking clearly, even judgment. What's remarkable is a study where supplementation actually improved cognition in 84% of participants who had both cognitive impairment and low B12.
84%, that's significant.
Very. Then you've got iron. Most people know it's for red blood cells carrying oxygen, but it's also vital for cognitive function, especially brain development. Interestingly, both too high and too low iron levels can disrupt nervous system function, affecting things like memory and attention.
Okay, so balance is key there.
Definitely. And we should also mention magnesium. Deficiency there is linked to decreased cognitive function and, importantly, increased susceptibility to stress. And stress is a huge trigger for brain fog. And vitamin C, too. We think of it for immunity, but adequate levels are associated with better concentration, memory, focus, attention. Low levels can contribute to depression symptoms. Lastly, choline. Maybe less well known, but it's essential for brain function, potentially protecting against cognitive decline. Some smaller studies suggest it improves memory, learning, and even how fast you process information. So you see, it's like a whole team of nutrients your brain needs to perform at its best. And among all these critical nutrients, omega-3 fatty acids really stand out, specifically DHA and EPA. They're genuine superstars for cognitive function and brain health overall. We call them essential fatty acids because our bodies, well, they just can't produce enough on their own, so getting them from our diet is vital.
They're like fundamental building blocks for the brain then.
Exactly. Think of them that way. They influence brain functions by improving how fluid the membranes of your neurons are, optimizing connections between brain cells, the synapses, and also modulating inflammation. DHA, for instance, makes up something like 40% of the key polyunsaturated fats in your brain. It directly enhances neurotransmission and synaptic plasticity, basically making it easier to learn and remember things.
Okay, and EPA.
EPA is more involved in producing anti-inflammatory substances. It helps protect the brain cells from damage. Keeping that balance between DHA and EPA is absolutely crucial for, well, everyday thinking, but also for potentially preventing brain diseases down the line. Plus, omega-3s actually support brain plasticity, the brain's ability to adapt and change, and they encourage the growth of new brain cells. They even boost the production of something called BDNF.
BDNF. Brain-derived neurotrophic factor. I've heard that called miracle grow for the brain.
That's a great analogy. Yeah, it's a super fertilizer promoting the growth and survival of neurons.
So practically speaking, what does all this mean for, our daily mental sharpness? Feeling focused day to day?
Well, the research is pretty clear. Getting adequate amounts of DHA and EPA can significantly improve learning abilities. This seems especially true for older adults or for people who are already experiencing some cognitive difficulties.
Right.
One study, for example, found that higher omega-3 levels were directly linked to faster information processing speed and better memory performance. And they even saw positive changes in the actual structure of the brain.
Wow. And you mentioned a really interesting twist in the research. Combining omega-3s with something else.
Ah, yes. This is fascinating. Combining omega-3 intake with cognitively stimulating leisure activities, things like doing puzzles, reading challenging material, learning a new language or instrument, seems to provide even greater benefits in reducing cognitive decline.
So it's a synergy. Feed your brain the right stuff and exercise it.
Precisely. It's not just passive consumption. Active engagement matters too. And if we take the longer view, thinking about long-term brain health, higher omega-3 intake is consistently linked to a lower risk of dementia, something like 10-20% lower risk.
10 to 20%? That's substantial.
It is. The anti-inflammatory and antioxidant properties are thought to be key drivers here. Specifically for something like Alzheimer's disease, DHA seems to help decrease the buildup of those harmful amyloid beta plaques and tau tangles, which are the key pathological markers of the disease. Animal studies have shown DHA supplementation improving memory, and DHA-enriched compounds actually enhancing the integrity of neural networks. Omega-3s also appear to help enhance the brain's energy metabolism, which often becomes impaired in neurodegenerative diseases.
Okay, so protective against long-term decline. What about more immediate mental health conditions? You mentioned some promising potential there.
Yes, that's a really exciting area of research. For schizophrenia, for instance, studies show that individuals often have lower levels of DHA in their blood and brain tissues. Some clinical trials have shown improvements in symptoms with omega-3 supplementation, particularly in young adults who are at high risk.
And for depression, that seems to be a big one.
A very big one. Many studies suggest that both EPA and DHA have antidepressant effects. They seem to influence neuroinflammatory processes, neurotransmitter function, think serotonin and dopamine and neuroplasticity. Now, the details matter here. The efficacy often depends on the dosage, and particularly the ratio of EPA to DHA. Doses of EPA around 1 to 2 grams per day, especially in formulations where EPA makes up at least 60% of the total omega-3s, have shown significant reductions in depression severity in multiple studies.
So the type of omega-3 matters, not just the total amount.
Exactly. EPA seems particularly important for mood. And even for anxiety, while the evidence is maybe less strong than for depression, one study did show a significant reduction in anxiety symptoms with a daily dose of 2.1 grams of EPA. So there's potential there too.
Okay, this is all very compelling. So the obvious next question is, how do we actually get enough of these omega-3s?
Right. The most consistent recommendation from the research is to eat fatty fish, think salmon, mackerel, sardines, herring, at least twice a week. Just as an example, a standard 100-gram portion of salmon gives you about 1.5 grams of combined EPA and DHA, so 2 servings gets you in a good range.
And what about people who don't eat fish, vegetarians or vegans?
Great question. For them, algal oil supplements are an excellent alternative. They're derived directly from algae, which is where fish get their omega-3s in the first place. So it's a direct plant-based source of EPA and DHA. Generally speaking, for brain health, the recommendations hover around 1 to 2 grams of combined EPA and DHA per day. The European Food Safety Authority actually suggests that up to 5 grams per day is safe for general health benefits. If you do go the supplement route, it's really important to choose high-quality sources. Look for brands that are third-party tested for purity and potency to make sure they're free from contaminants like heavy metals.
Good advice. Okay, so we've talked a lot about what to eat. Now let's shift our focus a bit to when you eat. This brings us to another really fascinating area you explored, intermittent fasting, or IF. This isn't really a diet in the usual sense, is it? It's more about cycling between periods of eating and periods of calorie restriction or just not eating at all, usually for periods of like 12 to 48 hours.
That's right. It's an eating pattern. There are several common ways people do it. You've got time-restricted eating, often called TRE or TRF, where you just limit your eating to a specific window each day, say 8 or 10 or 12 hours. Then there's alternate day fasting, ADF, where you alternate days of normal eating with days of fasting or very low calories. Or periodic fasting, maybe 2 days a week of fasting, 5 days normal eating, things like that.
Okay, so what's actually happening in the body, and specifically the brain, during these fasting periods?
Well, the core mechanism that's really compelling is something called the metabolic switch. After about 12 to 36 hours without food, your body fundamentally shifts its primary fuel source. Instead of burning glucose, which it gets from recent meals, it starts tapping into your stored body fat. And this process produces ketone bodies, particularly one called beta-hydroxybutyrate, or BHB.
Ketones, right, like in the keto diet.
Exactly. These ketones then become a preferred and actually very efficient fuel source for the brain, but it's not just about fuel. Ketones also seem to activate cellular pathways that promote the health of mitochondria, the energy factories in your cells. They enhance synaptic plasticity, those connections between neurons, and increase cellular stress resistance. Also, during fasting, your glucose levels naturally drop. This triggers a crucial process called autophagy.
Autophagy, that's like cellular housekeeping.
That's a perfect way to put it. It's like your brain's deep cleaning crew. Neurons get rid of old, damaged, or dysfunctional components, essentially cleaning house, which improves overall cell health and boosts antioxidant defenses. On top of that, IF typically improves insulin sensitivity, which helps your brain cells use glucose more effectively when you are eating, and it significantly reduces systemic inflammation by lowering levels of inflammatory white blood cells. It's like a multi-pronged benefit package.
And it's not just about metabolism, right? You mentioned something about internal clocks.
Yes, this is another really intriguing layer. Intermittent fasting seems to play a significant role in optimizing our internal biological clocks, our circadian rhythms. Our bodies naturally run on these 24-hour cycles for almost everything: hormone release, metabolism, sleep-wake cycles, you name it.
But modern life kind of messes those up.
It really can. Think about 24-hour artificial lighting, shift work, erratic meal schedules. All these things can throw our internal clocks out of sync. IF, particularly time-restricted eating, where you have consistent eating and fasting windows, appears to help resynchronize these rhythms. This leads to more optimal patterns for behavior, physiology, and metabolism. It's like resetting your body's internal operating system to its default healthy settings.
That makes a lot of sense. And there's a gut connection here, too.
Absolutely, a huge one. IDF profoundly impacts the microbiota gut-brain axis, as we touched on earlier. Remember, your gut is home to trillions of microorganisms, and the diversity and health of that community directly influence your brain through various pathways: neural, endocrine, immune. A typical Western diet, often high in processed foods and sugar, can dampen the natural, healthy, daily fluctuations, the oscillations of our gut microbiota. What's fascinating is that IDF, even if you don't change what you're eating, just changing when you eat, can help restore these beneficial cyclic fluctuations. This generally leads to a richer, more diverse gut microbiome. And in animal models, this improvement in gut health has been linked to better cognitive functioning, like improved spatial memory.
It really highlights how interconnected everything is: gut, brain, clocks, metabolism.
It really does.
Okay, so given all these intricate mechanisms, the metabolic switch, autophagy, circadian rhythms, gut health, what does the research actually show about EF's impact on specific brain disorders?
Well, the evidence is still evolving, especially in humans, but it's certainly promising in several areas. For Alzheimer's disease, animal models consistently show that IFF can reduce those amyloid beta plaques and slow down cognitive decline. In human studies, though smaller, there was one where people with AD or mild cognitive impairment underwent a 12-16-hour fast followed by a ketone injection, and they showed improved cognitive function. Another study involving a 3-year periodic fasting regimen showed enhanced cognitive functioning in older adults with mild cognitive impairment.
Interesting. What about other conditions, like Parkinson's?
For Parkinson's disease, again, mainly animal studies so far, but they show that a fasting mimicking diet improved motor skills retention and reduced the loss of neurons. And they observed higher levels of that BDNF, the brain fertilizer, which is crucial for neuronal survival.
Okay.
And
MS, multiple sclerosis.
yes, some striking results there too, particularly in mice. 3 cycles of a fasting mimicking diet actually led to a complete reversal of disease progression in MS-induced mice. This was linked to changes in their gut microbiota and a reduction in inflammatory cells. And encouragingly, human pilot studies have also shown lowered self-reported MS disability scores with FMD cycles.
Wow, complete reversal in mice is pretty dramatic.
It is. And there's potential relevance for acute events too, like ischemic stroke. In animal models, IF performed before a stroke occurred reduced neuronal loss and cognitive decline afterwards. Perhaps more clinically relevant, fasting started immediately after the injury and maintained for 24 hours also reduced neuronal loss. For epilepsy, animal models show IF can reduce neuronal damage following seizures and improve spatial navigation. And in children with drug-resistant epilepsy, periodic fasting protocols have shown improved seizure control in some cases.
What about mood disorders, depression, anxiety?
That's a bit more complex. In mice, a simple 9-hour fast increased BDNF levels and showed antidepressant-like effects. In humans, studies looking at Ramadan fasting have found lowered subjective feelings of depression and mania in some patients with bipolar disorder. However, it's really important to add a note of caution here. Other studies have noted potential for relapse or even worsened symptoms, particularly in schizophrenia during fasting periods. So it's definitely not a one-size-fits-all approach and needs careful consideration, especially for those with existing severe mental health conditions.
That's a really important nuance. Which brings up the question, does IF benefit everyone equally? And how long does it take to see effects?
Right, excellent questions. For people who are generally healthy, the research on short-term IF hasn't consistently shown clear cognitive benefits. There might even be a temporary dip initially, possibly just due to hunger or the body adapting. The potential benefits for healthy individuals seem more geared towards long-term protection against neurological disorders rather than an immediate cognitive boost.
Okay. And what about factors like age or weight?
Also areas with some complexity. Animal studies have conflicting results on whether there's an optimal age to start IF for longevity benefits. And regarding obesity, IF clearly improves metabolic markers like insulin sensitivity and blood pressure in obese individuals, and these improvements are protective against neurological diseases. However, we need more research to know if IF provides the same degree of direct neuroprotective effects in non-obese individuals independent of those metabolic improvements.
And is it just about eating fewer calories, or is the fasting part itself important?
That's a crucial distinction. While IF often leads to people eating fewer calories overall, simply because the eating window is shorter, studies suggest there's more to it. The time spent in the fasted state seems to confer unique benefits, independent of just calorie reduction. Research indicates that the fasting periods themselves can improve health markers, potentially extend lifespan, and may even lead to better preservation of cognitive function compared to equivalent calorie restriction without the timed fasting.
So the timing really matters.
It seems to. And related to that, the research also suggests that the quality of the food you eat during your eating window still matters, of course, and maybe even the timing of that window. There's some evidence, for instance, suggesting that early time-restricted feeding, like finishing your meals earlier in the day, say by mid-afternoon, might have more metabolic benefits, particularly for insulin sensitivity and inflammatory markers, compared to eating later in the evening.
Fascinating. So many layers to this. Okay, so let's try to wrap this up. What's the big takeaway for someone listening? It feels abundantly clear that this connection between what we eat and maybe when we eat and how our minds actually function day to day. It's incredibly powerful, isn't it? From, fighting that everyday brain fog with specific nutrients like omega-3s, vitamin D, iron, things we can actively seek out, to these really profound cellular and metabolic shifts that seem to happen with intermittent fasting. It really positions our diet as a true cornerstone of mental well-being and focus. This deep dive into the material you brought together, it really shows that choices that might seem simple, what's on our plate, when we eat it, can have these huge, far-reaching impacts on our cognitive abilities, our mood, and potentially our long-term brain health.
It really does make you pause and think, doesn't it? It shifts the perspective. Maybe the next time you're planning your meals or deciding when to eat, you could consider this. Are you just, feeding your body? Or are you actually strategically fueling this incredibly complex, magnificent machine that is your brain? Are you working to unlock its full potential for clarity, for memory, for emotional resilience?
That's a great thought to leave people with. It's certainly a lot to chew on, as they say. But hopefully you're walking away today with some really powerful new insights and maybe some practical ideas. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into nutrition and your mind. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep fueling that incredible brain of yours.